Adric Sable did not set foot in places like Halford's Market. Men like him sent people. But on a gray Tuesday in November, he parked his own car outside a failing grocery store on the east side of Dunmore and walked in alone, because a name on a crumpled receipt had refused to leave him alone for 9 years. He expected nothing. Another dead end, another stranger who only resembled a ghost. Instead, he found a pregnant woman being screamed at over a register, counting coins with shaking hands while a manager called her worthless, in front of a line of strangers. He recognized her wedding ring before he recognized her face. By the time Adric left that store, he owned the building, and he was not finished. Calla Mercer had learned to measure her life in the small distances between one pain and the next. It was 4 steps from the time clock to register 4. It was 11 steps from register 4 to the break room, where a vending machine hummed against a wall, the color of old teeth, and never once gave back the change it swallowed. It was 38 steps, if she took them slowly, from the front of Halford's Market to the bus stop where she stood every night, with her swollen ankles and her hand pressed flat against the underside of her belly, waiting for the 9:40 that was always late. She had counted those distances so many times, she no longer had to think about them, which was good, because lately thinking cost her more than it used to. She was 31 years old and almost 8 months along, and she was tired in a way that had stopped being a feeling and become a kind of weather. It lived in her bones. It pooled behind her eyes. Some mornings she woke on the narrow mattress in her one-room apartment and lay perfectly still for a full minute, gathering herself before she could convince her body that there was any reason at all to stand up. There was a reason. There was the smallest reason in the world, turning slow somersaults beneath her ribs. "You with us, Mercer?" Calla blinked. The fluorescent lights of Halford's swam back into focus, harsh and white, buzzing faintly the way they always did. A woman in a parka was setting groceries on the belt in front of her, not unkindly, just waiting. Behind her the line had grown to 5 people, then 6, while Calla had drifted somewhere none of them could follow. "Sorry," she said. "Sorry. Good morning." She began to scan, and here was the thing the customers saw, the thing the manager saw, the thing that had earned her the whispered nickname that followed her down every aisle. She was slow. Her hands did not fly across the items the way the younger cashiers did. She lifted each can, each box, each bag of apples carefully, deliberately, because 3 weeks ago she had nearly fainted, reaching for a case of water, and her doctor at the free clinic had said the words blood pressure and bed rest in the same sentence, in a tone that had frightened her more than any tone ever had. She could not afford bed rest. So she had made a private bargain with her own body. She would go slowly, and her body would let her keep going. Nobody knew about the bargain. Nobody knew about the clinic, or the blood pressure, or the dizziness that sometimes turned the edges of the world soft and gray. She had told no one. Telling people things had never once made Calla's life easier. It had only ever given them something to use. So she scanned slowly, and she smiled when she could, and she said, "Have a good one," to the backs of people already walking away. The store had been called Halford's for 60 years, though no Halford had owned it in 2 decades. Now, it belonged to a holding company nobody had ever met. A name on a letterhead, and the holding company cared about exactly one number, and the number was time, items per minute, transactions per hour. There were charts in the back office. There were colored bars. Calla's bar was red. She had not always been the red bar. 2 years ago, before Nico, before everything, she had been quick. She had been the one they put on register 1 during the holiday rush, because she never jammed up, never miscounted, and never lost her smile. The district manager had once called her a real asset, and she had been stupid enough, back then, to feel proud. Nico used to laugh at that. "A real asset," he'd say. In the gravelly voice he put on to tease her, "That's my girl, worth her weight in canned beans." And she'd throw a dish towel at him, and he'd catch it without looking, because Nico caught everything. Nico was never slow. at anything in his whole short life. She stopped the thought where it always had to be stopped. There was a wall in Kala's mind, and on the far side of the wall was Nico, and she had learned that if she let herself climb over it during a shift, she would not be able to climb back, and there was no crying allowed at Register 4. "Price check," she said into the dead intercom, then remembered the intercom had been broken since September. She set the dented can aside. "I'll just. Give me one moment. I'll run and check the—" "Don't bother." The man in line waved a hand. "Forget it. I don't even want it." He said it the way people said things. To her now, the way you'd talk to a slow door, an obstacle, a thing in your way, rather than a person. Kala nodded and kept her eyes down and finished the order, and the man left, and the line breathed out its collective impatience, and she felt, beneath her ribs, the small reason turn over, as if it too were sighing. It was 8:50 in the morning. She had been on her feet since 6. There were 8 hours left. The one mercy in her days was Odessa, who worked Register 2 and was 63 years old and had hands like a magician and a heart she tried very hard to hide. Odessa had appointed herself Kala's unofficial guardian roughly 5 minutes after meeting her, for reasons she'd never explained, and she had a way of materializing at exactly the moment Kala needed her not to be alone. "Sit," Odessa muttered now, sliding past with a roll of receipt paper, jerking her chin at the stool nobody was supposed to use. 2 minutes, I'll watch your line. Pruitt's in the back doing his little spreadsheets. I'm fine. You're gray as a dish rag is what you are." Odessa's eyes flicked to Kala's belly, then away. "Gentle, sit down. Before you fall down, baby. That's an order from your elder." Kala sat. The relief was so immediate and so total that her eyes stung and she had to look hard at the gum display until the feeling passed. From the stool, she could see the whole front of the store, the sliding doors that stuck halfway and let in a long cold breath of November, the wilting flowers in their plastic buckets, the handwritten sign that said "No Dry Teran," which had hung there so long the sun had bleached it white. She did not yet know that everything was about to change. She did not know that her last ordinary morning was already ending, that a man she had never met was at that moment 3 miles away, holding a faded receipt with her husband's handwriting on the back, deciding, after 9 years of looking, to finally drive east. She knew only that her feet hurt, and that the baby was kicking, and that somewhere in the back of the store, a door had just opened. Hollis Pruitt was coming up the aisle, and he was holding the charts. Hollis Pruitt was 34 years old and had been the store manager of Halford's for 8 months, and in those 8 months he had developed a theory about himself that he was a man held back. Held back by lazy staff, by a tired neighborhood, by people who didn't have his vision. The charts proved it. He loved the charts the way some men love a mirror. He stopped in front of Register 4. He looked at Kala on the stool, and something in his face tightened with satisfaction, as though she had handed him exactly the thing he'd come looking for. "Comfortable," he said. Odessa straightened from Register 2. She needed a second, Hollis. "It's slow. Look, there's no—" "Did I ask you, Odessa?" He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He'd read somewhere that quiet was more powerful, and he practiced it. Kala was already standing, one hand on the counter for balance. "I'm up. I'm fine. I just sat for a second. You sit a lot of seconds." He turned the clipboard around so she could see it, the way you'd show a child a bad report card. A red bar. Her red bar. "You know what this is? This is you. Bottom of every shift you work, every single one. You scan 30% slower than the next slowest person in this building. And the next slowest person is Odessa, and Odessa is older than the building." A small laugh from somewhere in the line. Kala felt the heat climb her neck. "I've had complaints?" Pruitt went on, and now he raised his voice. Just slightly, just enough to carry to the people waiting, because an audience was the whole point. People don't want to come here. You know why? Because they get stuck behind Register 4 for 10 minutes, while you, What is it you're even doing? Daydreaming? Are we paying you to daydream? I check the items carefully. Kala said quietly. I don't make mistakes. My count is always, I don't care about your count. The words cracked out of him, and the front of the store went still. A child stared. Odessa's mouth pressed into a white line. I care about flow. I care about throughput. This isn't a charity. This is a business, and a business cannot carry someone who can't keep up, no matter how. His eyes dropped, deliberately, to her belly, and his lip did something ugly. How delicate you want everyone to feel about it. Kala's hand moved, without her telling it to, flat and protective, over the curve of her stomach. That's what this is, right? Pruitt said, quieter again, leaning in so only she and the front row could hear. We're all supposed to feel sorry, poor thing, but I looked it up. Mercer, you're not protected the way you think you are. You've been late 4 times this month. You take unscheduled breaks. You've got a stool you're not authorized to use. He smiled. That's not me being cruel. That's documentation. She understood then what was happening. She had understood, maybe from the moment she saw the clipboard. He had not come to warn her. He had come with the ending already written. Please, she said. And she hated the word in her mouth. Hated how small it came out, but the math of her life left no room for pride. The rent was due in 9 days. The clinic was not free for everything. There was a crib she had been paying off $5 at a time at the consignment shop on Vera Street. And she was $40 from owning it. And she had thought, she had actually let herself think that she would have it before the baby came. Please, Mr. Pruitt, I need this job. I'll go faster. I'll skip my breaks. I just need to get to my due date. That's 8 weeks I can. See? That's the problem. He clicked his pen. 8 weeks of this. Then leave. Then whatever comes after. He shook his head. Almost gentle now. The gentleness of a man enjoying himself. I need someone reliable. I need someone fast. I'm sorry. I really am. He was not sorry. Clock out. Leave your vest at the office. Payroll will mail your last check. For a moment, Kala didn't move. The store had arranged itself into a frozen tableau around her, the customers pretending not to watch, and watching Odessa, with both fists clenched at her sides. The sliding doors stuck halfway, letting in the cold. She took off her vest. Her hands were steady now, which surprised her. She folded it once, neatly, the way she did everything, and set it on the counter beside the register she had stood at for 2 years. Thank you for the opportunity, she said, because her mother had raised her to say it, and because she would not give him the gift of her tears. She made it 11 steps toward the door. That was when the man in the dark coat who had been standing near the flowers the whole time, perfectly still, watching everything, set a single faded receipt down on the counter in front of Hollis Pruitt and said, in a voice as level and cold as the floor, "How much for the store?" For a long moment, nobody in Halford's Market understood what they had heard. Hollis Pruitt looked at the receipt on his counter, then at the man who had set it there, and his manager's face cycled through its small repertoire of expressions: annoyance, confusion, the beginnings of a dismissive smirk, before it settled on something it had not worn before that morning. Caution, because the man in the dark coat was looking at him, the way a man looks at a thing he has already decided about. We're not. The store is not for sale, Pruitt said. Sir? If you need a manager, I'm the manager. But you'll have to. I didn't ask if it was for sale. The man's voice did not rise. It didn't need to. It had the quality of something poured from a great height, smooth and unhurried and impossible to stop. I asked how much. Kala had frozen 11 steps from the door, her folded vest still warm in her hands, her back to the both of them. She did not turn around. Some animal part of her had gone very still, the way it did on the bus when a stranger's eyes lingered too long, the way it had learned to do in the years when learning to do it was the difference between a good night and a bad one. But she listened. Adric Sable had been standing by the flowers for a quarter of an hour. He had walked in alone, behind a woman in a parka, and drifted to the wilting carnations and stayed there, a tall, still figure in a coat that cost more than the store made in a week, and not one person had paid him any mind because people in Dunmore had long ago learned not to look directly at men who stood that still. His men were close, they were always close, but they were outside, in the cold, where he had told them to wait. He had watched the whole thing, the clipboard, the red bar, the stool, the word delicate, and the ugly little curl of the manager's lip when he said it. He had watched a pregnant woman say, "Thank you for the opportunity," to the man who was throwing her into a November street, and he had felt something move in his chest that he had spent 9 years believing was dead and buried under concrete. Because he had seen her face when she turned to fold the vest, and he had seen the ring. It was a thin, gold band, worn to a soft shine, slightly too loose now on a finger swollen by pregnancy, so she'd moved it to the smallest finger of her right hand. Adric would have known it anywhere. He had been there when it was bought. He had been the one who lent the money for it. A thick fold of bills in the back of a stolen car. A younger man's voice saying, "She deserves real gold, sable, not the green kind that turns your finger. I'll pay you back, I swear." And he had waved the debt away and never thought of it again. Because 3 weeks later, the man who'd borrowed it had stepped between Adric's sable and the thing that was meant for him and paid every debt that had ever existed between them in a single breath on a loading dock in the rain. Nico. Adric had looked for the widow for 9 years. He had looked the way a careful man looks for something he is afraid to find, through intermediaries, through quiet inquiries, never too hard, because some part of him had not wanted to stand in front of her and watch her learn who he was and what her husband had died protecting. The trail had gone cold. Mercer was a common enough name. She had moved, changed cities, and fallen off every list a man with Adric's reach could pull. He had told himself she had remarried. Started over. Was happy somewhere, far from all of it, and that the kindest thing he could do for Nico's memory was leave her undisturbed. He had been wrong about the happy part. He could see that now. "I don't think you understand how this works," Pruitt was saying, with the brittle confidence of a man narrating his own downfall. "There's a corporate office. There's a holding company. You can't just walk in off the street and Vance." Adric did not look away from the manager. He said the name to the air, and the air answered. A second man stepped through the stuck sliding doors from the cold outside, broad as a freezer, holding a phone to his ear, and he had clearly been listening the whole time because he was already talking. "Meridian Holdings," Vance said, to whoever was on the line. "The Halfords portfolio, East Dunmore. Yes, all 9 locations if they want, but the East Dunmore store today, before noon. Tell them a number. If it's reasonable, he'll double it to save the afternoon." Pruitt's mouth had come open. Calla turned around. She couldn't have said what made her do it. The name. Maybe, Sable. A name she had heard exactly once, years ago, from her own husband's mouth, in a tone she had never been able to place somewhere between debt and worship. Or maybe it was just that the whole room had tilted on its axis, and she could no longer keep her back to it. She looked at the man by the flowers. He was already looking at her. And here's what Calla saw in the half-second before she made herself look away. A man of maybe 45, with gray coming in at the temples of dark hair. A face that had been handsome once and was now something harder and more useful than handsome. And eyes. She would think about the eyes later, on the bus that never came. And in the apartment with the unpaid crib eyes that were looking at her the way you look at a photograph of someone you have lost. Not at a stranger, not at a slow cashier. At her specifically, as though her face were the answer to a question he'd been carrying so long. He'd forgotten he was still asking it. "Do I know you?" she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. For just a moment, something in the man's careful face came undone. "No," Adric Sable said. "But I knew your husband." The folded vest slipped from Calla's hands and dropped to the linoleum floor, and neither of them moved to pick it up. The office at the back of Halford's was the size of a closet and smelled of burnt coffee and toner. It had one desk, one window that looked out on the loading dock, and two chairs, and Adric Sable had cleared every other person out of it with nothing but a tilt of his head. Calla sat in one chair because her legs had stopped trusting her. He took the other, turning it to face her, and for a man who filled the doorway, he made himself strangely small in it, leaning forward with his forearms on his knees, his hands loosely clasped, the way you might sit at the bedside of someone you didn't want to frighten. Through the window she could see Vance on the phone, and Pruitt standing uselessly beside the dumpster, and Odessa hovering at the edge of the dock with her arms crossed, watching the office door like a hawk who would come through the glass if she had to. "You knew Nico," Calla said. It was not a question. She had decided somewhere between the register and this chair that she would not let her voice shake, and so far it had obeyed her. How? Adric was quiet for a moment, and she understood that he was choosing. And she had spent enough years around men who chose their words carefully. Men at the shelter, men at the courthouse, men who came around after Nico was gone offering things she never took, to know that the careful ones were sometimes the only honest ones. "We grew up 4 doors apart," he said, "off Caro Street before they tore it down. He was younger than me. He used to follow me and my friends around like a stray dog we couldn't get rid of." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "We weren't good men, Calla. I want to say that first, before you decide anything about me. The things your husband and I did, when we were young, I won't put them in this room, with you and the baby. But I'll tell you, he got out. That part's true. He got out before I did. And the reason he got out was you." Calla's hand had found its place on her belly again. "He met you," Adric went on, "and inside of a year he came to me and said he was done. Just like that? Done. And men did not say that to the people we worked for. Do you understand? You didn't leave. But Nico walked into a room full of men who could have put him in the river, and he said, 'I'm getting married, and I'm getting out.' And he said it like it was already decided, like the sky had told him." Now the almost smile reached his eyes, and it aged him and softened him at once. "He showed me a ring he couldn't afford. He borrowed the money off me for a better one. Real gold," he said. "You deserved real gold." The thin, worn band on her right pinky finger seemed to grow heavier. "He told me your name once," Adric said. "Just once." "Calla? Like a flower," he said. I thought he was being soft. He looked at the floor. I didn't think about it again for a long time. "You said you knew him." Calla's voice did the thing she'd ordered it not to do. Then it cracked, just at the edge. Past tense. "You said it before I told you anything. How did you know how did you know I was a brewer's?" She couldn't say the word widow. She had never once said it out loud in 9 years. "How did you know?" And Adric Sable, who had ordered the deaths of men without changing his expression, who had not wept at his own mother's funeral, found that he could not look at her while he said it. "Because I was there," he said, "when he died. He died in front of me. He died for me." The little office went very quiet. Out on the dock, Vance had stopped talking. Odessa had not moved. "There was a deal," Adric said, and his voice had gone flat and careful, a man walking across ice. 9 years ago it was supposed to be nothing. A handoff, the kind of thing I'd done 100 times. Nico was out of the life by then, completely out. You have to understand that. He had nothing to do with any of it anymore. He'd come to see me that night, for one reason. He came to pay me back. The money for the ring. Adric's clasped hands had gone white at the knuckles. 9 years married, and he tracks me down on a loading dock at midnight to hand me what he owed me, folded in a rubber band because he didn't want to die owing anybody. And he didn't even know he was about to just didn't like loose ends. Your husband, he didn't like loose ends. A sound came out of Calla. Small. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. "It went wrong," Adric said. "It was supposed to be a handoff, and it was an ambush, and the danger came from a direction I wasn't watching, and I was looking the wrong way. I was looking at Nico. I was laughing at him for the rubber band. and he saw it before I did. He always saw everything first. You know that you must know that about him. He caught everything, Kala whispered. He never even looked. He just caught it. He caught it, Adric agreed. And now, there was something wet at the edges of his hard, careful voice. He caught it for me. Kala was crying now, silently, the way she had taught herself to cry in rooms where crying was not allowed. No sound, just water, her chin up, her eyes open. 9 years. 9 years of a man with a rubber band and a fold of bills. The police had told her, robbery, wrong place, wrong time. We're very sorry for your loss, ma'am. And she had built her entire grief on that lie, on the senselessness of it, on the cruel randomness of a husband who'd simply walked down the wrong street. And it had not been random at all. He had died exactly as he had lived, catching the thing nobody else saw coming, paying what he owed, getting somebody out. They never found who did it, she said. The police said. They wouldn't have found anything, Adric said gently. I made sure of 2 things that night, Kala. The first was that the people responsible were dealt with. All of them, the one who acted and everyone who sent him. I'll say it plainly, because you're a grown woman, and you've earned the truth in this room, if nothing else. I spent a year of my life making certain that the men who took your husband from you would never harm anyone again. By the end of it, there was almost no one left to find. That's the first thing I did, she made herself ask. What was the second? For the first time, Adric Sable looked ashamed. I looked for you, he said, and I didn't look hard enough. I told myself I couldn't find you. I told myself you'd remarried, moved on, that you were happy, and it would be cruel to walk back into your life dragging all of this behind me. I let the trail go cold, because the trail going cold was easier for me. I let myself believe you were fine. He gestured. At the office, the toner, the burnt coffee, the loading dock, the whole gray weight of Halford's Market. And you were here the entire time, 9 miles from my front door, getting screamed at over a register, $40 short of a crib. Kala's head came up sharply. How do you know about the crib? Because I've been standing by your flowers for 15 minutes, Adric said. And your friend out there, he nodded toward Odessa at the glass, tried to slip you a few folded bills out of her own apron this morning, before your shift. And you wouldn't take them, and you told her you only needed 40 more and you'd have it yourself by Friday. His jaw tightened. $40, a rubber band's worth. You don't like loose ends either. He married the right person. That broke something. Kala put her face in her hands and wept, really wept, the wall in her mind coming down all at once. 9 years of held water, and Adric Sable did not touch her, and did not tell her to stop, and did not look away this time. He simply sat with her in the closet of an office, while she cried for the only man either of them had ever fully trusted, and he let her have every second of it. When she finally lifted her head, her face was wet and raw, and her voice had gone hoarse, but her eyes were clear, and they were fixed on him, and they had the directness he would later learn was the truest thing about her. So what is this? She said. You feel guilty. You found me. You're going to write me a check to make it stop hurting you. Is that what the store is? She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I won't be a loose end you tie off, Mr. Shid. Sable, I had a husband who paid his debts, and it killed him. I'm not a debt. Adric Sable looked at her for a long, long moment. Then he stood, and buttoned his coat, and said something that stopped her breath in her chest. You're right, Adric said. You're not a debt. A debt is a number. You pay it, and it's gone, and you feel lighter. He looked down at her. I don't want to feel lighter, Kala. I've spent 9 years trying to feel lighter and it doesn't work. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He went to the little window and looked out at the dock, at Vance, at the slumped figure of Hollis Pruitt, at the gray sky, pressing down on the gray neighborhood. When he spoke again, it was with his back to her, which she would come to understand was the only way he could say true things. When your husband died, I made him a promise, Adric said. He couldn't hear it. He was already gone. But I made it anyway, out loud, kneeling in the rain like a fool, because a man should say a thing out loud even if the only one listening is himself. He paused. I promised him I would look after his, whatever was his. I thought that meant find his widow, hand her money, walk away clean. I told myself for 9 years that's all it meant because that was the version I could do without changing my life. He turned around. But that's not what look after his means. He didn't step in front of what was coming for me so I could mail you a check. He did it because that's the kind of man he was. He saw somebody about to get hurt, and he put himself in the way. Adric's voice was very steady now. I'm going to do the thing he'd actually want. I'm going to stand between you and whatever's been hurting you. All of it. For as long as it takes. Kala stared at him. You don't even know me? I know you're almost 8 months pregnant and working 10-hour shifts on a bad blood pressure you haven't told anyone about. Her breath caught. I never said. You didn't have to. I watched you sit down on a stool like it was the first time you'd been allowed to rest in a month. And I watched the color go out of your face when you stood up too fast. And I've buried enough people to know what it looks like when a body is running on its last reserves. His jaw flexed. How long since a real doctor looked at you? Not the clinic, a real one. She said nothing. The answer was never, and they both heard it in the silence. That changes today, Adric said. He crossed to the door and opened it, and the gray morning light, and the cold and the sound of the dock came pouring in, and Vance straightened, and Odessa took a step forward, and Hollis Pruitt made the single worst decision of his small managerial career. Now hold on, Pruitt said, scuttling toward the door. I don't know what she's told you, but that woman is a documented performance problem. I have the records, I have the charts, and whatever sob story she's spinning about. Audric Sable turned to look at him, and Hollis Pruitt's words dried up in his throat like spit on a hot stove. Vance, Adric said, still looking at Pruitt. Is it done? Vance lowered his phone. Signed 10 minutes ago, boss. Wired and confirmed. Meridian took the number and ran before you could change your mind. East Dunmore Store, the building, the lot, the lease on the lot next door. A beat. You own the floor this gentleman is standing on. The blood left Hollis Pruitt's face the way water leaves a cracked glass. You, Adric said to him, conversationally, the way you'd remark on weather, are the manager of my store. For about another 90 seconds, he stepped close. He was not a large man next to Vance, but he did not need to be. There was a stillness to him that took up the whole doorway, the whole dock, the whole gray sky. I stood by your flowers for 15 minutes, and I listened to you tell a pregnant woman she was delicate. I listened to you read her own poverty back to her off a clipboard like it was a crime. I watched you smile while you did it. You enjoyed it. Don't bother saying you didn't. I've spent my whole life around men who enjoy it. I can smell it. I was just the numbers, the throughput. I was just doing my. You fired the fastest cashier this store ever had, Edric said, because grief made her slow, and you were too small a man to wonder why. He let that land. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of my store. You're not going to take the charts. You're not going to mail anyone a final check, because I employ everyone here now, and the first thing I'm doing as owner is correcting your last act as manager. He turned his head. Odessa. Odessa nearly dropped her arms, sir. You've worked here how long? 26 years, Odessa said, through 3 owners and 4 roofs. You're the manager now, twice the pay starting this morning. Your first official act is the same as mine. He looked back at Pruitt, and his voice never rose. And that was the terrible thing about it, that it never once rose. Kala Mercer is reinstated, full-time, full benefits, with a chair behind every register in this building, and no one is ever to time her again. Is that understood, manager? Odessa? Odessa's eyes were shining. Understood, she said, with pleasure. Now, Audric said to Pruitt, go. And Hollis Pruitt went stumbling white, robbed of his clipboard and his charts and his small kingdom of color bars, out through the stuck sliding doors that let in a long cold breath of November, exactly the way they had let it in on Calla an hour before, except that this time it was him the cold was pushing out. For a moment after he was gone, nobody spoke. Then Calla, who had risen from the chair and come to stand in the office doorway, with one hand braced on the frame, said in a small flat voice, "I don't want it." Adric turned. "What?" The chair. She shook her head, and she was not crying now. She was angry, and the anger was clean and bright, and the most alive she'd looked all morning. "You can't do this. You can't just walk into a person's life and buy the building and rearrange everyone like Thurna, like furniture. You bought a grocery store, Mr. Sable, 9 of them, to win an argument with a man named Hollis. Do you understand how insane that is? Do you understand that I have spent 9 years learning how to need nothing from no one, and you've undone all of it in 20 minutes with a phone call, and now I'm supposed to just, what? Be grateful?" Audric said it instantly, and the speed of it surprised them both. "Not mine." "Never mine, I told you. I'm not buying you." He came toward her slowly and stopped at a careful distance, and she saw with a small shock that the unbreakable man was, in this one thing, afraid. "I'm not asking you for anything. That's the part you don't believe yet, and I don't blame you, because everyone who's ever given you anything has wanted something back. I know. I was that once. I gave your husband money and felt like a king for it." His voice dropped. "But he gave me his life, Calla, and he never once made me feel like I owed it. He just did it, because that's what you do for your people. You stand in the way, and you don't send a bill." He held out his hand, not to take hers, she realized, but palm up, open, offering. "Let me be your people," Adric Sable said. "That's all. You don't have to be anything to me. You can hate me. You can take the job or burn it down. But you are almost 8 months pregnant with the child of the only good man I ever knew, and you are not going to stand at a bus stop in the cold, tonight, $40 short of a crib, while I have everything he died to give you and nothing to give it to." His hand did not waver. "He'd never forgive me, and I'd never forgive me. Let me do this one thing right. 9 years too late. Please." It was the please that did it. She had said that word herself an hour ago to Hollis Pruitt, and it had cost her everything she had left. She knew exactly what it cost a proud person to say it. And she looked at this dangerous, terrible, grieving man holding his open hand out across a closet of an office, asking, not telling, asking. And she understood that he had just handed her the only thing he had, that she could not refuse. The same powerlessness she'd been drowning in all morning. Calla looked down at his open palm, and she did not take it. Not yet, but she didn't walk away either. "I'm not calling you my people," she said hoarsely. "I don't even know your first name, Adric," he said. Adric. She tested it. Outside, the 9:40 bus, she would now never need to catch, went past the front windows without stopping. And neither of them noticed. "I'll take the job, Adric. Not the rest. The job. And I'm paying you back for the crib." A sound came out of Adric Sable that no one who worked for him would have recognized, because none of them had ever heard it. He laughed. "He said the exact same thing," Adric told her, wiping his eyes with the back of one scarred hand, grinning like a much younger and much poorer man, right before the rubber band. "I'll pay you back, Sable, I swear." He shook his head. God, he really did marry the right person. The thing about owning a grocery store, Adric discovered, was that it did not stay a single decision. It multiplied. By noon there were lawyers. By 1 o'clock there was a man from Meridian Holdings on the phone, sounding nervous, wanting to know whether Mr. Cause. Sable understood he had also acquired the 8 other Halfords locations across the county, and their combined operating debt, and whether Mr. Sable would like to discuss restructuring. Adric told him no, he would not like to discuss restructuring. He would like the heat turned back on in the East Dunmore store, and the broken intercom fixed, and the sliding doors that stuck halfway repaired by the weekend, and that he would be sending his own people to look at the books. And that if anyone at Meridian had been skimming the payroll of a store that paid its cashiers in colored bars and contempt, they should resign quietly tonight and save everyone the trouble. 3 people at Meridian resigned quietly that night. Calla watched all of it from Register 4, which she had insisted on going back to, because she was not going to spend her first afternoon as a reinstated employee sitting in a chair watching a billionaire rearrange her workplace. She had a stool now. She used it. Odessa, newly minted manager, kept finding reasons to walk past Register 4 and squeeze Calla's shoulder, and twice she pretended she had something in her eye. At 4 o'clock, Adric came and stood at the end of Calla's lane, with his hands in his coat pockets. "You're hovering," she said, scanning a loaf of bread for a teenager who had no idea the still man by the carnations had bought the floor under his sneakers. "I'm observing my investment. You don't observe a grocery store, Adric. You stock it." She made change, without looking, fast, fluid, the old quickness coming back into her hands now. That no one was timing her, now that she could breathe. He noticed. She caught him noticing. "I was always fast." She handed the teenager his receipt. "I was just carrying something heavy." Adric was quiet a moment. Then, "There's a doctor coming to see you at 6. A real one. Maternal fetal specialist, best in the state. She's already agreed to take you on through the delivery." He said it, carefully, watching for the flare of pride he'd learned to expect. "Before you fight me. It's not a gift to you. It's a gift to him. To Nico. You can be furious about it on his behalf if you need somewhere to put it." Calla's hands went still on the register. She had a speech ready. She'd been building it all afternoon, between customers, about charity, about independence, about how she'd gotten this far on her own, and didn't need a dead man's friend appointing himself her keeper. It was a good speech. She'd earned every word of it across 9 hard years. She looked at him standing there, this man who could not say a tender thing to her face but could buy 9 grocery stores before lunch to make sure no one ever timed her again, and the speech went out of her like air from a tire. "The clinic doctor said, my pressure was 160/100 last week," she said quietly. It was the first time she had said the numbers out loud to another living person. She said the word preeclampsia. She said if it gets worse, they might have to take the baby early. She said I needed to rest, and I needed monitoring, and I needed, her voice wobbled, she steadied it, I needed things I couldn't pay for, so I didn't tell anyone. Because telling people made it real, and I couldn't afford for it to be real. Audric did not move, but something behind his eyes went very cold and very focused, and she understood that she had just told him the one thing that frightened him. 6 o'clock, he said. His voice had changed. "She'll be here at 6. And Calla, from this minute, you have whatever you need, not whatever you can pay for. Whatever you need. The two are never going to be the same number again as long as I'm breathing." He turned to go, then stopped, and added, without looking back, in a lower voice almost to himself, "I should have looked harder. 9 years. You were 9 miles away with his child, and 160/100, and a $40 crib, and I was telling myself you were fine." He walked out to make a phone call. He did not want her to hear. Calla pressed her hand to her belly and felt the baby turn, slow and certain, the way Nico had always caught things without looking. She did not know that the phone call Adric was making would reach the wrong ear. She did not know that a name from 9 years ago, a name Adric believed he had erased from the earth, was about to learn that the untouchable Adric Sable had finally, after all this time, made himself a weakness. But the man on the other end of that wrong ear knew, and he began, very quietly, to make a plan. The doctor came at 6. Her name was Imara Voss, and she had the brisk, unbotherable manner of a person who had delivered 1,000 babies in worse rooms than the back office of a grocery store, and she took one look at Calla's ankles and her chart from the clinic, and her blood pressure cuff reading and stopped being brisk. "You should have been on monitored rest a month ago," she said, snapping the cuff off. "Who let you work like this?" Let me," Calla said. "I needed the money." "Doctor." Voss looked at her over her glasses, then at Adric in the doorway, and something passed between the doctor and the dangerous man that Calla didn't catch. "Well, you don't need it anymore," Voss said. "Here's the situation, and I'm going to give it to you straight, because you strike me as a woman who's tired of being managed. You have preeclampsia. It's not severe yet. We're going to keep it from getting there. That means real rest, not sitting on a stool between customers. Rest, and it means I see you twice a week. And it means the second your numbers spike, or you see spots or you get a headache that doesn't quit, you go to a hospital, not a clinic. A hospital, immediately. Can you do that?" Calla started the old calculation automatically, the one she'd run her whole life. What does it cost? What can I give up? And what corner can I cut? And then she remembered there were no corners anymore. "Yes," she said, and the simple weight of being able to say yes nearly undid her. "Yes, I can do that." "Good." Voss packed her bag. "Then with luck and rest you carry closer to term and we meet a healthy baby." "Without rest." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. When the doctor was gone, Adric drove Calla home himself. He hadn't meant to. Vance was right there, that was Vance's whole function, but when it came time to leave, Adric had simply taken the keys and said, "I've got it." And Vance had looked at his boss for a long second, and then handed them over without a word. Because Vance had worked for Adric Sable for 11 years. Calla's building was a 4-story walk-up on Vera Street, 2 blocks from the consignment shop with the crib. The stairwell smelled of other people's cooking. Her apartment was a single room, scrupulously clean, almost empty, a bed, a hot plate, a chair, a window with a plant on the sill that she'd grown from a clipping, and against the far wall a space cleared and waiting, swept and ready, where a crib was supposed to go, and didn't. Adric stood in the doorway and looked at the cleared space and the swept floor and the readiness of it, and Calla watched his jaw work. "Don't," she warned. "I'm not doing anything. You're doing the thing with your face. The buying 9 grocery stores thing." She lowered herself into the chair, one hand under her belly. "I know what an empty space against a wall looks like to you now. But I want you to understand something before whatever you're about to do." She looked up at him. "I was happy here, Adric, some of the time. I want that on the record. I cried in this room, and I was scared in this room. But I also felt him here sometimes late at night, like he was just in the other." She stopped. There was no other room. "I made a life out of nearly nothing, and it was small and it was mine and nobody could take it because there was nothing in it worth taking. Do you understand why a person might want that, after everything got taken once?" Adric came in. He didn't sit. There was only the one chair, so he crouched, the way he had in the office, bringing himself low, putting his eyes level with hers. "I understand it better than anyone you've ever met," he said quietly. "I built my whole life out of having nothing worth taking. I made myself into a man with no soft places, because soft places are where they get you. That's the entire secret of me, Calla. That's how I survived the thing that killed your husband. He had a soft place, you, and it got him out, and then it got him killed. And I looked at that, and I decided, never, no soft places, ever." He let out a slow breath. "And then I walked into a grocery store this morning to look at a ghost, and I made the worst tactical error of my entire life, which was, I found out. He was right and I was wrong." His voice was very low. "He died with a soft place, and he died full. And I've been alive for 9 years with no soft places, and I'm the emptiest man in the county." He looked at the cleared space against the wall. He left a soft place behind him, 2 of them now. "And I'd rather get got than keep being empty. So, that's my confession. That's the thing under all the grocery stores. I'm not saving you. I'm trying to learn how to be a person, from the only family, the only good man I ever knew left in the world." For a long moment, Kala didn't say anything. Then she reached over slowly, the way you'd move near a wild animal that had decided, against all its instincts, to come close. And she put her hand on the side of his hard, scarred face, the way you'd touch someone you decided to trust. And Adric Sable went absolutely still, except that this stillness was the opposite of the carnation stillness. That one had been a predator's. This one was a man who had not been touched with tenderness in so long, he'd forgotten what to do with his face. Okay, Kala said softly. People, we can be people, but I have rules. Name them. You don't fix things by buying them. You ask first, always. Even the crib, especially the crib. That one's mine. I'm $40 in. I finish it myself. That's not negotiable. Her thumb moved once against his cheekbone. And you tell me the truth. All of it, including the parts that scare me, because I have spent 9 years being protected from truths by men who thought they knew better, starting with the police. And I'm done. If there's danger, you tell me. If there's a reason a man like you suddenly having a soft place is a problem, you tell me. I'd rather be scared and know than safe and stupid. Nico kept things from me, to protect me, and look how that... She stopped, because Audric's face had changed. What? She said. What is it? You're doing a face, but it's a different face. Adric was quiet for a moment that went on a beat too long. You said, tell you the truth, he said slowly, including the parts that scare you. Yes. He stood and walked to the window and looked down at Vera Street at a car parked across from her building. A car that had not been there when they arrived. A car with someone sitting in it who had not gotten out. Then here's a true thing, Adric said, very calmly, not turning around. When I built my life with no soft places, I made enemies. The night Nico died, I dealt with the people who set the ambush. I told you that. What I didn't tell you is that I didn't get all of them. His hand rested flat against the window frame. There was one man, the one who actually gave the order. He went underground so deep I couldn't reach him, and after a few years I decided he'd either died or learned his lesson, and I let it go. I let that trail go cold too. A muscle in his jaw flexed. I'm very good at letting trails go cold, when chasing them is inconvenient. It's the worst thing about me. It killed 9 years, between me and you. And it may have just, Adric. Kala's voice was very steady. Why are you looking out the window? Because there's a gray sedan across the street, Adric said, that followed us from the store. And the man in it is on his phone, and he is looking up at this window. He turned around, and his face was the carnation face again. The still one, the predator's, except that now it was pointed at the whole world on her behalf. Get your coat quietly. We're not staying here tonight. They did not run. Adric did not let them run, because running, he explained, in the stairwell in a low, even voice, was what they'd be watching for. You go down at a normal pace. You're a pregnant woman who forgot something in the car. I'm a man helping you. We get in, I drive, and I do not accelerate until we're around the second corner. Can you do that? I scanned groceries for 2 years while my pressure climbed to 160, Kala said. I can walk calmly to a car. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or grief, or both. And then it was gone, and he was opening the stairwell door and they were walking, unhurried, across the cold November street to the car. And Kala did not look at the gray sedan, and her heart did not slow down even slightly, and she kept her face soft and bored the entire way, and got in and pulled the seatbelt as far around her belly as it would go. Adric drove. Around the second corner, he accelerated. By the fourth corner, the gray sedan was 3 cars back and trying not to look like it. He's still there, Kala said, watching the mirror. I know. You're not losing him. I don't want to lose him. Adric's hands were easy on the wheel. If I lose him, I have to wonder all night where he is. This way, I know exactly where he is, and I get to choose where this happens, and it's not going to be anywhere near you. He picked up his phone, thumbed it once. Vance gray sedan. 2 men picked us up at Vera. I'm bringing them to the lot on Castellane. Bring the others. And call Dr. Town. Voss, I want her on standby tonight, near a hospital, paid for the whole night, whether we need her or not. A pause. No, Calla stays with me. I'm not putting her somewhere, I'm not. He hung up. I get a vote, Calla said. You get every vote about your life. This is about mine. He glanced at her. The man in that car is here because of 9 years ago, not because of you. You're the reason he knows to come, but you're not the reason he wants to. He's the last loose end from the night Nico died, and he spent 9 years watching me from underground, waiting for me to do the one thing I never did, which was give him something to take. His jaw tightened. And I gave it to him this morning. I walked into a grocery store and let the whole world watch Adric Sable care about something. I might as well have taken out an ad. Culla absorbed this. Out the window, Dunmore slid past the pawn shops, the check-cashing places, the laundromat's glowing fluorescent, the whole hard, tired neighborhood. She'd lived in her whole life and never once seen from the passenger seat of a car like this. So this is my fault, she said. No. Sharp, immediate. This is his fault, and a little bit mine for being careless 9 years ago, and not one atom yours. Don't pick that up. You've been picking up things that aren't yours, to carry your whole life. I watched you do it for 15 minutes, by the carnations. Put it down. He took the turn onto Castellane. What's about to happen has been coming for 9 years. You just happened to be standing next to me when it finally arrived. The only difference you've made is that now I have a reason to make sure it ends tonight, instead of letting it follow me around for another decade. The lot on Castellane was a fenced acre of gravel and dead weeds behind a shuttered warehouse. Adric apparently also owned, because of course he did, and it was dark and it was empty, and Adric drove to the center of it and stopped and turned off the engine and turned on the dome light so that the car became a lit box in the middle of a black field. Impossible to miss. You're making us a target, Calla whispered. I'm making us bait, Adric corrected. There's a difference. Bait has people watching it. He turned to her, and for the first time all day, his voice was not steady. It had something underneath it, something raw. Listen to me. In about 2 minutes that sedan is going to come through that gate, because he can't help it. He's waited 9 years and the gate's wide open. When it does, you're going to get down on the floor of this car, and you're going to stay down no matter what you hear. Not for me, for him. He nodded at her belly. You don't get to be brave tonight. Brave is my job. Yours is to keep that baby's mother breathing. Those are the assignments. Do you accept them? Calla looked at him. You came back for me, she said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't about tonight. 9 years too late, you said. But you came. People don't. Mostly. They mean to, and they don't. You actually, her voice caught, don't die doing the thing you finally came to do. That's a stupid way to keep a promise. He wouldn't want it. For 1 second, the carnation stillness cracked all the way open, and what was underneath it was just a tired man who had been alone for a very long time. I don't plan to, Adric said. I've got soft places now, 2 of them. Men with something to lose, get careful. A grim ghost of a smile. You made me careful. Calla Mercer, first time in 9 years. Down. Now. Headlights swept across the gate. Calla got down on the floor of the car, folded as small as an almost 8 months pregnant woman can fold, her cheek against the cold rubber mat, her arms wrapped around the underside of her belly, and she began, without deciding to talk to the baby in a whisper too low for Adric to hear. About the rubber band and the folded bills, about how its father caught everything without looking, about how it came from a long line of people who paid what they owed and stood in the way, and how it was going to be loved so much, by more people than its mother had ever dared to count. Above her, she heard Adric's door open. She heard his boots on the gravel. She heard the gray sedan roll to a stop, and 2 doors open, and a voice she had never heard. Old, dry, amused, the voice of a patient man at the end of a long wait, call out across the dark lot. Sable, 9 years. And all it took to find you was a fat little cashier. I should send her a card. And then she heard Audric Sable answer, in a voice she would never forget, as long as she lived, calm, almost gentle, with the whole cold weight of 9 years and one dead good man behind it. You should have stayed underground, Renz. You had a whole life down there. You traded it for one sentence about her, a pause, gravel, shifting, wrong loose, end, to pull. Calla heard it more than she would ever be able to describe it, because she kept her eyes shut and her body curled around the baby exactly as she'd been told, and so the night came to her as sound. She heard the dry, amused voice. Ren say something about money, about how this didn't have to be ugly, about how a smart man would talk. She heard Adric say nothing. She heard the particular silence of men deciding. The silence she'd felt once before that day in a closet of an office. Except this silence was the kind that comes right before everything happens at once. She heard the first sharp crack split the dark and her whole body clenched around the small reason beneath her ribs. Then she heard a great many things very fast. She heard glass. She heard a man cry out, who was not Adric. She knew his voice now. She'd have known it anywhere, and the cry was not his. She heard running on gravel, heavy and scattering, and then she heard more sharp cracks, from more directions, and she understood that Vance and the others had been there the whole time, in the dark beyond the lit box of the car, that Adric had not made them bait at all. While his own men closed the gate behind the sedan, and came in from the black edges of the lot like the night itself developing teeth, it was over faster than she could have believed, faster than the 9:40 was late, faster than a man can borrow money and pay it back years too soon. Then there was a silence, with nothing left in it, only the ticking of the car's cooling engine, and somewhere far off, a dog barking at things it couldn't see, and Calla lay folded on the floor mat, and did not move because no one had told her she could. The car door opened. "It's me," Adric said. "It's done. You can come up slow. Don't look left." She came up slow. She didn't look left. She looked at him, at his face in the dome light, checking it frantically, the way she'd once checked items across a scanner. Every inch of him. Is he hurt? Is he hit? Is he? And he was not. There was a thin cut along his jaw from flying glass, and his coat had a tear at the shoulder, and his hands, when he reached in to help her sit up, were not quite steady. "You're not hurt," she said. It came out as an accusation. "I told you, careful men." He was breathing hard. "I'm a careful man now. You did that. What happened to—" She started to turn left. "Don't." His hand came up gently to the side of her face, turning it back toward him. The same gesture she'd made to him in her apartment, given back. "You don't need that picture in your head for the rest of your life. Trust me on the one thing I'm an expert in. Some pictures you can't put down once you pick them up." His thumb wiped a smear of something off her cheek. Her own tears, she realized. "He's gone, Calla. The last one. The whole night, 9 years ago. It's finished. There's no one left underground waiting. There's no one left at all. It's over. Really over. For both of us." And Calla, kneeling on the seat of a car in the middle of a black gravel lot, with everything that had just happened behind her and the living in front of her, did the only thing that made any sense, which was that she began to laugh and cry at the same time helplessly, the way a body does when it has held too much for too long, and is finally allowed to set it down. And then she stopped, because something low in her belly had tightened and gone hard, and stayed hard, in a way that was not the baby turning over. "Adric." Her voice had changed completely. The laughing was gone. "Adric." He went white. What is it?" "Something's wrong." Her hand was flat against the hardness. "It's too early." Adric, it's too early. Something's—" And then she gasped, because behind her eyes the world had done the thing the clinic doctor had warned her about. The thing she'd never told anyone, the edges going soft and gray and full of spots of light, and a headache slammed down across the back of her skull like a dropped gate. I see, there's spots. I see spots. She said if I ever see spots. Hospital, she said hospital. Not clinic, she said. Adric Sable had walked into something 4 minutes ago that would have broken most men, and his hands had finally stopped shaking, but they started again now, and this was a different shaking entirely. Vance. He had her in his arms, out of the car, moving across the gravel without any memory of deciding to. Vance, the car, the good car, now call Voss. Tell her it's happening. Tell her preeclampsia. Tell her spots and a headache in weeks early. Tell her we're 10 minutes out. He was in the back of the second car before he finished the sentence. Calla across his lap, her head against his chest, and the city was tearing past the windows in long smears of light. Stay with me, he was saying over and over into her hair. Stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me. Tell me about the crib. The $40. Tell me about the crib. Calla. Stay with me. It's white, Calla whispered. His voice was coming from far away and then close and then far. It's white, and it has little moons on it carved. The man at the consignment shop he held it for me. 9 months. Never sold it. He could have sold it 10 times and he held it. Because I put $5 on it every payday and she was crying. I'm $40 away, Adric. I'm so close. Don't let me. I have to finish it myself. I have to put the last 40 down myself. You promised. You promised me. The crib was mine. It's yours, Adric said fiercely, his face pressed to the top of her head. This terrifying man who had never begged for anything in his life, now begging the universe with everything he had. It's yours. Every nail of it's yours. You finish it yourself. I swear it on him. I swear it on Nico. You're going to put the last $40 down with your own hand and you're going to put your baby in it. But you have to stay awake. You have to stay. Do you hear me? You don't get to do what he did. You don't get to step in front of the thing, Calla. Calla. The hospital doors. White light. People in scrubs. And a gurney. And Dr. Ray. Voss already there. Already shouting numbers. Already in motion. And hands taking Calla from his arms and Adric Sable, who let go of nothing, who had held on to a dead man's promise for 9 years rather than set it down, made himself open his arms and let them take her, because for once holding on was not the way to keep her. You stay out here, a nurse told him, a hand flat on his chest. The only person in 9 years to physically stop Adric Sable from going where he wanted to go. Are you the father? Adric opened his mouth. No, he said. And then, because it was true, because it had become true, sometime that day, between the carnations and the gravel lot, he said the rest of it. I'm her family. I'm all the family she's got. Go save them both. Whatever it costs, there is no number, just save them both. The doors swung shut, and Adric Sable, alone in a hospital corridor at midnight with a cut on his jaw and the long night still clinging to his coat, lowered himself into a plastic chair built for ordinary people having ordinary emergencies, put his scarred face in his scarred hands, and, for the first time since a loading dock in the rain 9 years before, prayed. Her name was Wren. She came at 3:14 in the morning, weeks early, 3 pounds and some ounces, by emergency cesarean that Dr. Voss performed the moment Calla's numbers crossed the line she'd been watching all night. She was very small and very loud, and the loudness, Voss said afterward, was the best sound in the world, because it meant her lungs, against the odds of coming so early, had decided to work. Calla came through it. Barely, and then, not barely, and then, as the long gray morning came up over Dunmore, simply, she came through it. The pressure broke like a fever once the baby was out. By dawn, she was stitched and stable and sleeping, and down the hall in a clear plastic bassinet under warm lights, a tiny girl with her father's stubborn grip held onto a nurse's finger and would not let go. Adric did not sleep. He stood at the glass of the NICU for hours, a still man in a torn coat, watching, the smallest reason in the world, breathe. When Cal awoke, near noon, he was in the chair beside her bed, and he had not changed his clothes, and the long night was still written all over him, and he looked, for the first time since she'd met him, completely undefended, too tired to hold up any of the walls. "She's alive!" Calla said. It was the first thing, before her own name, before anything. "She's perfect," Adric said. "She's loud. She's furious about everything. She's got his grip, you should see it. She won't let go of anything you give her." His voice was wrecked. "Foss says small but strong, says you both." He stopped and pressed his lips together, and got it under control. "You both made it. You scared 10 years off me, Callum Mercer, but you made it." Calla looked at him for a long moment. "Ren," she said. "I named her Ren. Nico wanted Ren if it was a girl. He said it years ago, just once, and her eyes filled. "I didn't think I'd remember. I thought I'd lost all the little things he said. But it came right up out of me when the doctor asked. Ren." "Ren?" Adric repeated, like he was learning a sacred word. "It's a good name, small bird." Loud out of all proportion to its size. A rough sound that was almost a laugh. "Fits." They sat with it, the two of them in the quiet. Then Calla said, "I have to ask you something, and I need the true answer, the scary one. You promised." Adric nodded. "Last night. The lot. Is it over? All of it? The thing from 9 years ago. Is there anyone left who's going to come for you? For us? For her?" She glanced toward the hall, toward the NICU. "Because I will love you, Adric. I think I already do. In whatever way. A person can love someone they met yesterday who saved her whole life. But I will not raise that little girl looking out windows. I did 9 years of looking out windows. She doesn't inherit that. So tell me true." "It's over," Adric said, and she watched his face while he said it. The way she'd watched it all day yesterday, and she found no shadow in it. Ren's was the last thread. "I've spent the morning making sure. The calls. The people who'd know. There's no one underground anymore. There's no debt, no order out, no one watching. It died in that lot with him. I'd swear it, on anything you put in front of me. But I know, oaths are cheap. So instead, I'll just say, I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have a reason to stand at a window again. Not as proof, as a fact, as a thing I do." Calla closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet and clear. "Okay," she said. "Then there's one more thing, and it's not negotiable, and you don't get to fix it or buy it or send a man for it. Name it." "There's a consignment shop on Vera Street," Calla said, "and there's a white crib in it, with little moons carved on the headboard, and I am $40 away from owning it, and the man is holding it for me." She looked at him steadily. "When I get out of here, you're going to drive me there. You're going to wait in the car. And I'm going to walk in by myself and put the last $40 on that counter with my own hand, and I'm going to carry that crib out. And you can help me load it, but you don't pay a cent, and you don't say a word. Because my daughter is going to sleep, her first night in a bed, her mother finished paying for. Do you understand? That one's mine." He'd understand. "You understand." For a moment, Adric couldn't speak. "He'd understand," he managed finally. "I'll wait in the car." And then, quietly, the closest he could come to everything he didn't have words for, $40. A rubber band's worth. "You two are going to be the death of me." He wiped his eyes openly now, no longer hiding it. "Best death I can think of. Mon." Outside the window, the gray November sky had finally, after 3 days, begun to break apart, and a thin, hard, winter sun came through and fell across the hospital bed, across the woman who had counted the distances of her life in pain and would now count them in something else. And, somewhere down the hall, a tiny girl named Ren held onto the world with her father's grip and refused, loudly, furiously, magnificently, to let go. 3 weeks later, a white crib with little moons carved into the headboard, stood against the far wall of a one-room apartment on Vera Street, in the cleared space that had waited so long for it. It had been paid for in full, the last $40 laid on the counter by Callum Mercer's own hand, while a dangerous man waited in a car at the curb and said not a single word, exactly as promised. The apartment didn't stay one room for long. But that's a different part of the story. What matters is this. They fired the pregnant cashier for being slow. They saw a red bar on a chart and a woman who couldn't keep up, and they decided she was worth less than her throughput, and they put her out into the cold 11 steps from the door. They never once wondered what she was carrying. They never asked why the fastest hands the store ever had moved slow now. They saw a problem to be managed, and they managed her right out into a November morning. And they had no idea, that the still man by the wilting carnations was the one debt in the world that could never be timed, never be charted, and never be fired. That her slowness wasn't weakness. It was a woman protecting the last living piece of a man who once protected everyone. That the quiet ones, the slow ones, the ones we write off in the checkout line, sometimes they're carrying the whole weight of someone's redemption, and they're carrying it without making a sound. Adric Sable went looking for a ghost and found a family. Callum Mercer went to work one ordinary morning and lost a job and gained the one thing 9 hard years had taught her to stop hoping for people. And a little bird named Wren slept her first night in a bed her mother finished paying for, under a headboard of carved moons, watched over by more love than any chart could ever measure. That's the thing about the people we underestimate. Sometimes they're the strongest ones in the room. If this story moved you, if you believe the quiet ones deserve to be seen, if you'd have wanted someone to stand by those flowers for you, then smash that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment that got you? Was it the rubber band, the $40, the little moons on the crib? I'll see you in the next one.